This is Lisa DeMonte from mylegal.com. We are here in Washington, D.C. on March 22nd at the Georgetown University Law Center. And we're here for a 3-day conference talking about law firm evolution, brave new world, or business as usual. And I'm delighted to have with me this morning Cynthia Epstein, who is a distinguished professor of sociology at the Graduate Center, the City University of New York. Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Cynthia, you're going to be part of a panel in just a little while talking about career paths and labor markets. So tell us a little bit about what the discussion is going to be. I know that you are both the moderator as well as a panelist.
Well, the panel is going to deal with career paths, and my own work has been on the career paths of women over the years, and of course they've had a very interesting path in that in the early days of big law, they weren't to be seen. They were invisible, except for a very tiny number. Just, everybody knows Ruth Bader Ginsburg couldn't get a job when she got out of law school, and Sandra Day O'Connor couldn't get a job. But now women are half of all the law school recruits, and a good percentage of doing very well. They're in the best law schools, and they have been absorbed into the large firms, and indeed they're about a half of all the recruits in all the large firms as well. So the question is, in this market, which is so precarious, what's going to happen to the women, and what's going to happen to the people of minority backgrounds who also, for the first time, have the opportunity to become included in the profession. So I think we're going to talk partly about that, but also talk about what's going to happen to the young men as well, who themselves thought that they would have sort of clear sailing, and they're also going to have to look to see what kinds of opportunities are there for them.
So what do you think is going to happen with the law students, both male and female? Are their expectations going to be different? Are they going to be looking at new opportunities, or perhaps opportunities that when they entered law school they hadn't initially thought they would be pursuing?
Well, it's quite interesting. I found in a more recent study that one characteristic of law students is that they're somewhat risk averse. That's why they chose the law. They didn't know what else to do. They were really smart. They hate the sight of blood, so they choose the law. And they thought that once they got into it, they would know what they would be, and they would have a very good legal career. And of course, a growing percentage of them were going into the large firms. So now that's not so clear anymore. And of course, a certain subset will go into it and will do quite well, but a much tinier percentage than happened before. So indeed, what are they thinking about now? They're scared. I mean, you just have to look at the blogs and see how they are wondering whether they made the right choice, whether they should have gone into some other field, or whether they'll be able to specialize in a way that will make their contributions much more salient and marketable. And of course, many of them have been furloughed, and they get a job with a big firm, and lo and behold, they have a year off with a third of their pay. So what are they doing? Nobody's done a study of that. You know, a certain number are going to public interest firms, but a number of others just are sort of cast about. So it's a very peculiar time for a whole cohort of students who are the best and the brightest and entering into this very peculiar situation. I think they may be exploring other fields, you know, like business opportunities and so on. But even there, of course, there are problems. So we're in this very tumultuous period, and this question is, what's going to happen? I think not many people really know.
So do you see a higher dropout rate amongst your law students than you have perhaps in the past, or do you see them completing law school and then perhaps pursuing something outside the traditional law firm environment?
I think they're still going into law. They're hoping that they will have jobs, and I think some of them are getting advanced degrees to sort of stretch out the period of apprenticeship and scholarship, hoping that the whole thing will change. So there's more hope perhaps over experience, they say. And the question for them is, as you're asking me, is that they don't know. They just don't know. I think this is a really confusing time for people who are looking for certainty. And I don't know, maybe more and more of them will be looking to engage in sort of more independent kinds of businesses. Maybe more will go into technology, and they're really smart at doing that. But we haven't seen any trends, and we haven't seen really any data on what they're doing.
Do you feel then that the law schools are going to need to make some significant changes in their training and their programs to help both women as well as men in the law schools adapt to the changing marketplace and perhaps offer areas of specialization to help them promote themselves as they're looking for new opportunities, or perhaps to get the opportunity in the first place?
Well, I think they're certainly thinking about it. I think the law schools are scared too, because they're afraid that fewer students will apply to the law schools and they'll have fewer students. But I think they're becoming much more attuned to the market than they were, because before the market came to them and they were in a very good position. I haven't heard them talking about the different kinds of programs they should have, let's say for women and minorities as opposed to the young men. That's not on the agenda. I don't think they even want to think about that now. I think that for the really top law schools, they never were very specialized. The idea was you learn sort of the philosophy of the law, and it was somewhat for the down market law firms to teach the specialization. So I think now some of the top schools will devote a little bit more of their agenda to actually having some practical kinds of courses, or practical kinds of at least meetings and support services for students that they never had before. They'll have to go just a tiny bit more commercial, so to speak. I think it was the case, as I mentioned before, women now have come in. They're half of the students and they're half of the recruits to large firms. When I looked at their careers in the research I've done, I found that the most successful were those who specialized. And so they became experts in their area, and then they were considered to be quite attractive. They were
sought after.
And sought after. Or they developed them, and they developed the expertise within firms. They also were very hard workers, and they didn't look for the kinds of accommodation that many younger women now expect and want. They didn't look for part-time work. They didn't look for alternative career tracks. They just made it like the boys did. Which is not to say they didn't have families. Many of them did. And how they did it, it's a mystery to me. But they did it. And I think they accomplished it quite well. I mean, it's not the case that the only successful women were those who didn't have families at all. In fact, most of the women partners that I interviewed had families.
So they were able to balance it in some way.
I wouldn't call it balance, but they did accomplish it. I mean, they used a lot of help. They had husbands who didn't help with the child care and didn't help with the throwing out the garbage, but often they had husbands who helped them with their careers. Husbands who gave them contacts and really felt that they were very accomplished and gave them support. And I think that's really the important element that very few people talk about. The husbands who are who recognize their wife's abilities and encourage them to actually fulfill those abilities, and who also bring them into their professional world.
Cynthia, we could probably continue just on that last topic for several hours, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us what you'll be talking about here at the conference. Thank you.
You're welcome.